Hello. Khadim Ali and Meiro Koizumi. So we'll start with you, Khadim. But let me just say a few words about both Khadim and Meiro's presentation. In your research, Khadim, you look at how aesthetics plays a large role in the normalization of violence in Afghanistan. What this normalization has also meant is an erasure of many other cultural and social reference points in everyday life. I'm told, for instance, that graveyards are no longer organized in terms of family members, but by violent events and incidents. Meiro, you look at the emotions behind the handling of truth. In your project about the confessions of a war criminal, a Japanese soldier who fought in Southeast Asia, you are especially interested in the emotional aspects of both the expressions by the war criminal, as well as the reception by today's youths, the reception of suppressed truths now brought to the open. Well, Meiro and Khadim, you both look at militancy. You approach the issues from different dimensions, even as you are both deeply concerned with unpacking the way that truth has been constructed in such regimes. So I hand over to you, Khadim.
Thanks very much, Wing. The normalization of violence in Afghanistan and certain part of Pakistan is very much normal now. For example, a friend of mine was asking me where my house is in Quetta, and I told him that's in Alamdar Road. And then he was asking me which part of Alamdar Road, and then I gave him more details, and then he said, oh, near the first explosion happened where the first explosion happened, or where the second? And I said, where the first happened. I said, is that the one that 14 people died in that? Yes, that is. And also in Afghanistan, if you ask, let's meet at the Himazang, they would say that which location near the explosion that killed 85 people or near the explosion that killed 40 people. So it's crazy to see that how violence is becoming the landmark. And ever since I consciously started observing my surroundings in Quetta, I was born and raised in Quetta, Pakistan, which is a border city of Pakistan with Afghanistan. There have been the talk of violence, and there have been catastrophic events that become landmark later. For example, there was Russian in Afghanistan, and then there was a lot of refugees seeking refuge at the border part of Pakistan with Afghanistan. And Quetta was also one of the border city of Pakistan with Afghanistan. And in the refugee camps, which I call them training camps, refugee camps where these the NGOs were actively teaching these kids in the school, and in the schools they were taught that A for Allah, J for Jihad, and I is for infidel, K for Kalashnikov. And in the math book it was like one is equal to one gun, two rifles, or three daggers, four grenades. Or it was related with the weaponry imageries, and also in the math book, or in the math book, there were problems like if a Muslim kills 5 communist soldiers out of 10, how many communist soldiers remained? And if one communist soldier, if each communist soldier carry 1 rifle, and if you kill 5 communist soldiers, how many guns you collect? How many rifles you collect? So there was problems like that, and these kids the families were of course looking for a way of earning, and because Afghans are very much into the rug weaving or carpet weaving, so these kids were weaving little rugs, or they're setting up little looms in the camps, and the kids were weaving rugs, and the imageries on those rugs were coming from the book that they were taught in the school. And there was imageries of weapons took places of the beautiful flowery motifs or Afghan motifs, and that the history of war actually started from there. And in 1992, when Russian evacuated Afghanistan, just before that, there were so many jihadis were trained into Pakistan during the Ziaul Haq, and they were sent into Afghanistan. And Quetta was one of the main recruitment point for the jihadis. Were actually very active in Afghanistan, but when the Russian evacuated Afghanistan, these mujahideens or international mujahideens were not given any exit from Pakistan, and then they left at the border of Pakistan with Afghanistan, and later during the civil war in Afghanistan, they became part of Taliban, they became part of Al-Qaeda, they became part of many other terrorist organizations. And these terrorist organizations were actually fighting for the benefits of the neighboring countries. Like there were Taliban and Al-Qaeda were fighting for certain countries, and there were terrorist organizations fighting for Iran and fighting for Pakistan and India. And if we look at the history of violence a little bit back into Afghanistan or the bordering cities of Pakistan with Afghanistan, there are many references. There are religious references that I knew that when Taliban were beheading is one of the most brutal acts of violence. So when you look at the history of beheading, there are religious stories. You can see the imageries of Prophet Ibrahim trying to behead Ishmael. And then also you can find the references into the mythical stories when in Shahnameh you can see there are many stories. A hero is actually beheading the enemies, and also the hero actually killed his son. And then these two factors are actually fueling the fire in the violence, and the violence is now people are kind of immune to the violence. And when there's explosion happening, people were just passing by, crossing by. When there are dead bodies, people were still selling, street vendors still selling their stuff. And the stores are still open, people are still operating, and the shops are still operating. And then in Afghanistan, you also see that how the ethnic majorities are demonizing and dehumanizing the other minorities on the basis of their ethnic, sectarians, or religious. And I, in Quetta, went to the Christian schools, and I remember my friends who were Muslims are asking me, "Oh, you are sharing food with Christians? Are you going to the Christian school?" And the same thing is happening now in Afghanistan. When the internationals are arriving there, and when they're going to the local villages, people are trying not to shake hands with them because they think that if you shake hands with an infidel, your entire body will be dirty for 40 days. So these are the factors which were mostly infused during the jihad, during the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, when the Americans were, and most of these NGOs were fully active, or spreading these poisons in the region. So,
I have just a quick follow-up question. Sorry. I have a quick follow-up question. Just in terms of, you were talking about the school situation where you have the normalization of violence there. And then I was thinking about, what about humor and jokes? How are jokes sort of normalizing violence? Do you have an anecdote about that?
People are making fun of it now. Like, people are trying to adopt it, to adopt their surroundings. Like when they say, they call themselves a living martyr, a shaheed is in that, a living martyr. I said, where are you going? I'm going to that distance, but I'm going from Kabul to Bamiyan, but the way is very, very risky. You might get killed by the Taliban and say, it doesn't matter. Then I'm a shaheed zinda, I'm a living martyr now. And then that time I'll be a dead martyr. Doesn't matter. So it is, the people have adopted it, like they have adopted it during the Russian invasion. They have adopted it, the images of weaponry into their rugs, and then the images of weaponry, or into the poems or into the music. They're living with it now. It's part of their life now.
I'll follow up with that more, but this also sort of gives me an opportunity to move into Meiro's presentation. And in some ways, the joke is a way of handling, a joke is a way of speaking when you can't actually speak, right? And in some ways, that's very connected to a problem that you are exploring, how to begin to articulate something that has not been articulated or is so difficult. So let me hand over to you.
Sure. Can you play the video? Okay, so just like other countries, in Japan we are experiencing the rise of nationalistic sentiment, and my work is clearly about made against this situation. And with art, what can I do? And when we were younger, we had a general feelings that the feeling about the cruelty of Japanese soldiers in Asian countries, China, Vietnam, Philippines, all these places. People didn't talk about it. Almost nobody talked about it, but we had this general feeling that we shouldn't ask our grandparents, what did you do? Like, did you kill? So we had this general feeling, and the guilt was still there in the society. Unconsciously, nobody talked about it, but it was there. But today nobody pays much attention to these testimonies, and we are kind of experiencing the collective amnesia. So now nobody pays much attention, and even when you read something about their testimonies, few testimonies, when you read it, you feel like it's so far away. Something happened like 70 years ago. It feels like something happened in a different world. So it is very difficult for us to relate our daily life, relate our consciousness to what's happening here. So our imagination just stops there. So that was like, this is a situation that I'm making my work against too. So I decided to work with, to make work with Japanese veterans who had been talking about his experience as a perpetrator. So my collaborator found, this is Mr. Kondo. He's 99-year-old, and he killed many Chinese people. He was in China. He killed many Chinese people. He raped women, just as other people did. But he's one of the only few people who talked about everything. So 2 books were published about him, and it's edited testimonies of him, and also his biography. And so we approached his family, but the family said he's getting too old now. He's 99, so they're not sure if he remembers things, and they're not so sure if he can talk his stories. But they said, why don't you come to see him in the hospital? He's now in hospital. So one day we went to see him in the hospital, and as we entered the hospital, the nurses came and said, no, don't talk about the war today. Don't stimulate him, because they said he's not getting any sleep at all these days, and every night he screams, Chinese people will come to chop my head off. Please help me, please help me. That's every day he's repeating this, and he's not getting any sleep. So please don't talk about the war. So we're like, we just say hello to him. But then family said, if we still want to do the interview, they'll help us to set up the interview. So we said, please, I would like to, do the interview. So we did the interview. We had 45 minutes, and I showed him the book, and he didn't even remember his own book. I was like, wow, what is this? And I asked him questions from the books, and some things he still remembers, but many things he didn't remember. And one of the incidents, one of the story that I asked him is one of the story I asked during the interview is that if he remembers the story where he had to watch Chinese people being decapitated. This is a part of the training, 3 months basic training, and at the end of the training, it's like a ritual that they had to watch it. And I asked him, do you remember this? And he said, no, he doesn't remember this. But later in the interview, I asked him, so do you still dream about war in China? And he said, yes, he still dream about it. So can you tell me about the dream? And he said, he's standing and he has to watch a person being decapitated. And he said he sometimes dream about this, but actually he's dreaming this every night. So this is what happened like after 70 years, after all this training, what happened to this person's, he get flashbacks, he get this trauma very deeply, embedded in his unconsciousness that, he still suffers, he very much torment. So my project is that, but soon the people, we have already lost so many people with the trauma, and soon they'll be gone, and we are just left with the words that it is so difficult for us to relate to ourselves. So my project is more or less about giving new body to these words, that giving, how do I say, look for the space where his words and the contemporary Japanese landscape and our body meets. And I have to create something that reactivates our imagination so that his word regains some sort of new reality, because now reality is totally gone. So I had 11 young people between 17-year-old to 26-year-old. It's around the age of the soldier. And the project was that we had 10 testimonies, and they picked one testimonies by themselves, and they had to memorize word by word. So that was the session, word by word, and after they memorized the word, we tried to create some performance together. So it was all an experiment we did with his words and new body and in the city of Tokyo. And so can you play the second video? So this is one of the examples that we got.
集隊で一人の女性を捕まえてきたんです。お決まりのようにトーチカの中に入れて、7、8人で
So she's a woman, and she memorized a story where Mr. Kondo confessing about participating in gang raping of a woman.
7、8人でカールガール臨間をしました。
So now she's memorizing.
中隊で女性を一人の女性を中隊で一人の女性を捕まえてきたの無表情で、行為中も何の反応も見せませんでした。私が中国で林間に加わその女性が100回だろうがそれは同じことです。その女性がそこに2日止められ中隊で一人の女性を捕まえてきたんです。中隊で一人の女性を捕まえてきたんです。囲いの中に入ると女性は全裸で寝かされており、私の顔を見ても全くの無表情で、行為中も何の反応も見せませんでした。中隊で女性を一人捕まえてきたんです。お決まりのようにトーチカの中に入れて、7、8人でカールガール臨間しました。4年兵から始まって3年兵の番になりました。お前の番や、お前行ってこいと言われ、囲いのあるところへ行って、ちょっと嫌な気持ちがありましたが、結局は自分の番かくらいの気持ちで林間に加わりました。囲いの中に入ると、女性は全裸で寝かされており、私の顔を見ても全くの無表情で、行為中も何の反応も見せませんでした。中国で林間に加わったのはその1回でした。しかし、1回だろうが100回だろうが、それは同じことです。その女性がそこに2日止められたのか、3日止められたのか、殺したのか、返したのか、それについては記憶がありません。
Okay, thank you. So this is one of the performances. It was one of the, and she, in the end, later she started to cry. So it was very interesting for me that she could represent the body of perpetrator as a Japanese, but also she's representing the victim, the woman, young woman who's been raped. And so two things that were happening at the same time in her body. And after the shooting, she told me something very interesting to me. When she was trying to identify with the victim, the woman, it was so, she couldn't go further than just sadness And it just, for her, it was a dead end. Sadness, she was sad, horrible, and she couldn't find any hope. But once she shifted her, her way of approach, and once she tried to relate herself with Mr. Kondo, the man, the perpetrator, then all of a sudden she said, it opened up the new dimension where, she felt very sorry for, of course, the victim, but at the same time, she wanted to be forgiven. She was like desperate to be for the forgiveness, and for her that opened up a new space for her while she was doing this performance. And there was something that I learned in the process, that of course it is very important to deal with narratives of the victims, but narratives of the perpetrator kind of opens up different kind of space. And for me, this is one of the things that I'm learning from my work this time, and I'm hoping that maybe I can do a little bit more with this dimension, with this possibility. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm very glad you ended on those 2 points, because I really was going to think. My first question for you is, how would you like to follow up?
Sure. Okay. Yes. So socially, we have like a big museum of. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and so we have all that. But for example, to deal with this kind of things, we only have very small archive center where only they are self-run and they get money from somebody from time to time. But they are very active, but very, very small. So I think with art, I can speak aloud about this. And then it's a kind of re-engraving the trauma in the culture. So this is like
But I mean, one of the things, of course, which was such a powerful contrast, is to use an age group that were soldiers at the time.
Sure.
And it would be wonderful if you could follow that group till they're 70, or much later, or 99,
yeah,
right?
That's true.
And because one of the questions that also comes up is when you talked about how she could only identify through sadness, but then once she had a new frame of reference, which was to meet Mr. Kondo.
Kondo, yes.
That she began to think about the dynamics of forgiveness.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting if you talk about the great trauma of the war, and then of course in the next 50 years, what will be the kinds of larger traumas that our civilizations face, and how that set of references will really help kind of activate an understanding of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I think so, yeah.
Khadim, if I can go back to you and ask you to elaborate a little bit more about some of the imagery. You were talking about like the carpets and how they were beginning to have the bombs in them. So that's the way that you normalize violence. But there are, of course, another kind of set of images as well. More mythical figures like Rustam. So if you could speak a little bit about that.
With the imageries on the rug, well, first it was started, like I said, in the camps. It was very, very basics, but later on, the business people, they got into it. And then after the 9/11, there were twin towers in it, and then there were machine-designed war rugs. And it actually lost its soul from the war rugs. It was meant to be woven by the people who were displaced due to the war. And so then, well, I'm looking at the works looking at the history as a reference. I was looking at the Shahnameh, and Shahnameh is a book that is written in 1080, and there is stories of love in it, but even the love stories are ending with violence in it, and even the hero is becoming hero when he is beheading someone, when he is killing someone, when he is defeating someone in a battle. So the standard of becoming a hero is actually violence, is war. You have to be on a certain standard, a certain level to defeat all your rivals, and then you're a hero. So Taliban also used the icon of Rustam as propaganda when they were calling themselves the Rustam of Islam. Rustam is the icon of hero, and then we will fly over Afghanistan. And of course, the propaganda was using everything that is deeply rooted in the people. But then I also try to adopt it like a child who was living in a refugee camp, and then his canvas or his paper was his loom, where he was weaving, whatever was coming in his mind. And I also tried to weave my tapestries, to weave my rugs with the modern war imageries or elements that I go through, with the historical reference of the mythological stories. Yeah.